No one went near Boca Pahar after sundown, not since the night of the Red River, when every fish in Girichari floated belly up, and the village shaman was found upside down, hanging from the banyan tree with his mouth sewn shut by his own hair. That was 12 years ago. Since then, silence ruled the jungle. Not peace, just the kind of silence that pressed on your eardrums and made your teeth itch. And then the drums returned, soft at first, from the hills. 3 beats. Pause. Then one long thump, like a heartbeat played through a hollow skull. Only the old people remembered the rhythm. They called it Dora Shabdo. When it plays, whispered Sherbari Didi, the midwife, the forest eats something. The first victim was a newborn, perfectly healthy, born with bright eyes. Then, on the 3rd night, it screamed so loud the palm leaves on the hut shook, and its mouth split wide, too wide, revealing rows of black teeth. By sunrise, the child was gone. No sign of entry, only a puddle of soot beneath the cot. Then the dreams began. Men woke up screaming, clawing at their own faces. One old man tried to rip out his eyes with fishhooks, claiming he saw the woman of the trees dancing inside his skull. By the 7th day, the forest changed. Monkeys left, birds vanished, and at dusk, smoke rose from Boca Pahar. But there was no fire, only shadows, twisting like ropes, crawling down the slopes. Then came the footprints, burned into mud, cloven, deep, and backward. The village elders held a council. Some wanted to flee. Others demanded a blood sacrifice to appease the old gods. But the forest had already chosen. That night, in the middle of the square, the banyan tree bled. Its bark peeled back like skin, and in the hollow trunk, carved in fresh red, you opened it again. We are awake. The price is all of you. In the morning, a man arrived on foot, old, thin, dressed in white, though his robe was torn and stained with saffron dust. He carried no luggage, no food, only a tasbih, a wooden cane, and a scent of burning incense clinging to him like armor. He walked straight to the tree, touched its bleeding bark, and whispered something in Arabic that no one could hear, but the tree hissed in response. The villagers stood frozen. Then the stranger turned, his eyes gleaming like steel under smoke. "This is not your fight anymore," he said. "It's mine now." His name was Shah Fakir Munshi, and by the next moon, the dead would walk again. Shah Fakir Munshi spent his first night in the abandoned prayer hut, just beside the river where the water had turned black. No one offered him food. No one dared speak to him after dark. The villagers remembered too well the last holy man who came here. He died laughing, his jaw unhinged, chanting in a language no one understood, while his eyes boiled out of his skull. But Munshi was different. He never blinked, and when the jungle fell silent, he recited verses aloud, slow and calm, as though reminding the air that it was still under God's eye. The jungle didn't like it. At exactly midnight, the drums began again, louder now, not from the hills, but from the edge of the village. The goats screamed, chickens scattered, and at the salt line, drawn by the villagers as a ward against evil, something stepped through. A woman, they said later, tall, wrapped in a black sari that floated behind her like smoke. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Her eyes were solid white. Her arms bent the wrong way, like branches broken and reattached. She drifted from house to house, peering through windows. Everyone froze inside their huts, holding their breath, until she stopped in front of the shaman's widow's house. She didn't knock. She hummed, a low, vibrating note that made the wooden walls sweat. And then she melted through the door. No one moved until sunrise. When they finally opened the door, the widow was still in her chair, but her body was hollow, completely hollow, like something had scooped her soul out with a ladle. Her eyes were gone, and in their place were two smooth black stones, still wet. That morning, Shah Fakir Munshi stood in front of the entire village, holding the widow's comb, soaked in blood, and said, "This was not her death. This was a message." He drew a new salt line himself, but this time he mixed it with ashes and verses burned into leaves. Then he placed a mirror facing the jungle at every corner of the village. She cannot look at herself. The mirror remembers who she was. That night, the wind rose, but the drums did not play. Instead, there was laughter, and not just one voice. Many, from the trees, the ground, the wells, and from inside the mirrors, scratching, like something trying to claw out. The scratching began at sundown, not outside, but from inside the mirrors. At first, the villagers covered them with cloth. By nightfall, many had shattered anyway. The broken shards didn't reflect anything, just blackness and movement. Something was watching from the other side. That night, a boy named Pulu vanished. He was last seen sitting by the river, tossing pebbles. His sister, Rini, said he had been talking to someone in the water, laughing. "Auntie came," she whispered. She said he could fly now. His footprints ended at the bank, but his shirt was nailed to the tree behind him, with a nail made of bone. That same night, Shah Fakir Munshi sat alone in the center of the village square, barefoot, drawing symbols in the dirt with a finger dipped in turmeric and blood. The village headman, Bola, approached him. "Whatever you're doing," he whispered, "do it faster. The people are breaking." Munshi looked up, eyes sunken but sharp. "She is not alone," he said. "What rises now is not of one body. It is of many mouths and one shadow." He lit a fire of neem leaves and dried fish bones. The smoke curled against the wind, rising backward into the air. And then a scream echoed from the hill. Not human, not animal, but a language made of pain. All the dogs in the village howled at once, and in the eastern huts, something began crawling sideways along the walls. The villagers who saw it described it the same way. It had no face. Its hands were backwards, and its belly dragged like a sack of bones. One man tried to shoot it with his hunting rifle. When the others found him, his eyes had been sucked from their sockets, and his mouth had been sewn shut with vines that grew out of his throat. They buried what was left of him at dawn, but the vines kept growing from the grave. That morning, Munshi sat in front of the banyan tree again. He held a doll he'd found near the girl Rini's hut. Inside its cloth belly were dried lizard tails, crushed glass, and hair. Human hair, tied with red string. "These are Kurur jinns," he muttered, "summoned by a contract, bound to the altar. The drums are not just calls, they are commands." Then he looked at the villagers and said, "Tonight we burn the altar, or we all become mirrors." They left just after sunset. Shah Fakir Munshi, Bola the headman, and 7 villagers too afraid to stay and too scared not to follow. The jungle swallowed them whole. The path to Boca Pahar hadn't been used in decades. The ground was soft with rot, and trees grew inward, arching unnaturally like bent ribs. Birds didn't sing. Even the wind had stilled, as if something were listening. Munshi walked without hesitation. His tasbih beads clicked in rhythm with his steps. Each word he whispered was a prayer and a weapon, laced with the old tongues, Arabic, Pali, Sanskrit. They reached the clearing before midnight, and there it was. The altar, built of bone and stone, shaped like a low pyramid. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart. Skulls were stacked at the base. Some animal, some not. All around the altar were hanging totems, bundles of feathers, fingers, and broken toys, swaying despite the still air. Munshi stepped forward and poured a circle of salt, oil, and soil from a grave dug before sunrise. "You must not speak," he warned, "no matter what you hear." Then he lit the fire. The altar screamed. It didn't crack or crumble. It shrieked like a woman giving birth through broken glass. The ground trembled. The totems twitched. And from the trees they came. Children, naked, crawling, but they had no eyes. Only smooth, empty sockets. They moved sideways, heads tilted, fingers bleeding from digging in the earth. One of the villagers broke. He screamed, ran. They heard him die in less than 10 steps. A soft snap and a wet, dragging sound that ended with laughter. Not child laughter. Something older. Munshi knelt before the altar, hands raised. He spoke to it, not with fear, but fury. "You are not of this soil. You were buried for a reason. Return to your pit, beast of flame and bone." The fire flared. The altar cracked. But before it broke, something pushed back. A hand shot from the center, a woman's hand, skin gray and long-nailed, gripping Munshi's wrist. She began to climb out. Not a ghost. Not spirit. Flesh. Made new. Her eyes burned red beneath the veil of ash. Her face was stitched with black string. She hissed in 4 voices at once. Munshi spat into his palm, spoke a name none of them remembered, and pressed it to her forehead. The earth exploded in wind and flame. When the villagers opened their eyes, the altar was gone. But so was Munshi. Only his tasbih remained, wrapped in black hair, coiled like a snake. When they returned to Gurachari, the sun had not risen, but it should have. It was past dawn, and the jungle remained dark, lit only by a violet haze that clung low to the trees. The rooster crowed once, and then dropped dead on the spot, blood seeping from its eyes. The villagers knew something had gone wrong. The altar was gone, yes, but what had been sealed there had escaped. The saint was gone too. All that remained was his tasbih, coiled and wet, like it had been pulled from a stomach instead of a prayer mat. That night, a silence fell over the village deeper than any they'd known. There were no shadows, not because there was no light, but because everything cast 2 reflections. Each flame in a lantern flickered in opposite directions. Each villager who passed a wall saw another version of themselves, still, quiet, but grinning. And the mirrors? They didn't show people anymore. They showed her, the woman from the altar. She had no name, no form. She was rot-wrapped in silk. She stood in every reflection, arms open, waiting. And the children began to speak in sleep. "Auntie says it's her wedding day. She's coming to get her face back. We were all born in the wrong skin." Then the possession started. Rini, The little girl whose brother had vanished began to bleed from her fingernails. She wrote verses backward on the walls using ash and spit. When Bola tried to stop her, she bit his arm. Not a child's bite, a grown woman's jaw strength. She whispered, "You promised me a groom." That night, the drums returned, but now they beat from inside the village, from inside the wells, and in the sky. The moon cracked, not really, but something moved across it, like a claw drawn over its face. The villagers gathered in the square, clutching each other, praying, weeping. Then the banyan tree split down the middle, and Shah Fakir Munshi walked out, burned, bleeding, but alive. Barely. He collapsed at their feet, eyes wide. "She's no longer waiting," he croaked. "She's already chosen." Tonight, the bride walks the village. They tried to hide, but you cannot hide from a thing that has already touched your dreams. Munshi lay under the banyan tree, wrapped in wet cloth and smeared with ash. He hadn't spoken since he collapsed. His breath came in wheezes, each one sounding like a prayer being swallowed. The villagers surrounded him, desperate, terrified. "How do we stop her?" Bola asked. Munshi opened one eye, bloodshot, burned. "You don't. She's already inside you. What walks now isn't just her. It's what she became after death." That night, no one lit lamps. They thought darkness might shield them. But the drums began anyway. This time not from afar, not from the trees. From inside their own huts. One woman heard them beneath her bed. A man heard them in his water pot. A child heard it from inside his own chest. And then, one by one, villagers started to scream. Each person who had once seen their reflection in a mirror now saw her walking in place of themselves. The bride, draped in shadow, limbs loose like a puppet, veil fluttering without wind. Her mouth was always slightly open, and from it poured a dry buzzing, like flies in a jar. One girl, barely 16, was found dancing in the fields, her feet bleeding, her ankles twisted beyond natural bone, but she moved like a bride at her wedding. She wept as she danced. She sang in a voice not her own, and then she dropped to the earth, and her shadow didn't fall with her. It stood upright, turned its head, and walked back toward the village. That was when Munshi woke. He screamed a word none understood, a name, maybe, or a curse. And then he stood. "She needs one more to complete the ceremony," he whispered. "She needs a groom. And then the rest will burn." The villagers begged him, "How do we stop the wedding?" Munshi didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his satchel and pulled out an old bridal necklace, blackened with soot, its gold now dull and pulsing faintly. "We bury this where she first drowned, under the river, with fire, with skin." He paused. "And someone must go with it." Bola stepped forward. So did Rini. But Munshi shook his head. "No, it must be me. I was the one who saw her eyes and lived. I am the one she wants to finish." They left before midnight. Munshi walked ahead, barefoot, humming a broken verse. Behind him followed Bola, Rini, and two others, each holding a mirror, each one already cracked. The jungle parted like it remembered him. No birds, no breeze, just a stillness that listened. They reached the place where the old river forked, now dry, its bed packed with black stones. It was here, the elders had whispered, where the Merim bride had drowned herself, her wedding anklets heavy with grief, her breath caught by betrayal. Munshi placed the necklace in the center of the riverbed. He drew a circle of mustard seeds, turmeric, and burned hair, muttering as he worked. "You will not be wet again," he whispered. "Not to me. Not to anyone. Go back to your hunger." He pulled out a small clay pot, his own blood inside, mixed with ashes, and then he cut a line into his palm and let it drip. "Take the groom you chose. Let the rest be free." Suddenly, the ground shook. The riverbed cracked open. A hand shot up hers. Not bone, not spirit. Flesh wrapped in shadow. Fingernails like carved obsidian. She pulled herself from the earth, her sari dragging behind her like a funeral shroud. Her face had no eyes, only mouths. Dozens of mouths, all screaming in different voices. Some were villagers. Some were children. One was Pulu's. Munshi didn't flinch. He stepped into the circle, faced her. "I saw you when you still had one face. I mourned you before you turned to wrath, but now I end you." He dropped a mirror at her feet, and it shattered inward. The ground opened fully, swallowing them both. The necklace vanished. The air turned warm, and the moon, cracked for days, finally came back whole. In the village, the drums stopped. The shadows reattached to the bodies they belonged to. The mirrors cleared, and the banyan tree bled no more. But the river whispered, and in the morning, the villagers found Munshi's tesbih on the bank. Wrapped around it, a single white bridal bangle intact. The curse was broken, or so they thought. For 7 nights, no one dreamed. No one heard drums. The mirrors reflected only what they should, and the village exhaled. They began cleaning the huts, digging up the altar's old grounds, burying the broken totems in salt and fire. Rini laughed again. Bola smiled for the first time since his wife vanished. Even the birds came back, tentatively nesting near the edge of the banyan tree. But on the 8th morning, the river changed. It had been dry for years, but now water trickled upward from beneath the cracked stones. Not clear water, red-tinged, like something rising from a deep, forgotten well. And floating in that water, a letter, written in Munshi's own handwriting, folded perfectly, dry despite being surrounded by wetness. Bola opened it with shaking hands. Inside, "She is gone, but not the others. She was not the only bride buried without a face. The hill remembers more, and I am not alone down here." That night, the children began drawing. They used charcoal, dirt, and chicken blood. All the same image. Munshi, but not standing, not praying. Seated in a throne of bones, surrounded by women with veiled faces and missing mouths. "He's the groom now," whispered Rini, eyes wide. They made him stay. The next morning, the earth cracked again, this time not under the river, but beneath the village mosque. The well beside it, once sealed, now gurgled. Black water spilled upward, and inside it something moved. The villagers tied stones to the lid. They built a second barrier, burned incense, recited prayers from every holy book they knew. Still, the whispers came at night, soft, giggling, in languages no one spoke anymore. In Rumi's house, the door creaked open by itself. In Bola's home, the food rotted while cooking. In Rini's dreams, a woman sat brushing her hair with a comb made of vertebrae, whispering, "You cut one head, the others still watch." And then the banyan tree began to bloom, but not with flowers, with bones, finger bones, hanging like fruit. each one carved with a name. And the first name on the lowest branch? Shah Fakir Munshi. The bones bloomed for 3 nights. Each morning, the villagers found more names carved into them, some familiar, others old and forgotten. One was a girl who drowned 50 years ago. Another was a boy whose body was never found, though they'd blamed a tiger. And then came the last branch, the final name, Rini. The villagers panicked. Bola tried to flee with her at dusk, packed a boat, tried to take the backwater route through the jungle. But the river wouldn't move. The water stood still, thick like syrup. The boat would not float. Rini didn't cry. She simply whispered, "They're calling the last bridesmaid." That night, the banyan tree cracked at the trunk, and the bride returned. But she wasn't veiled. Not anymore. She had 1,000 faces, all of them flickering like candle flames, some crying, some laughing, some whispering ancient verses. Her body was stitched together from parts of dreams, shadows, bones, and grief. She walked from house to house, her footsteps silent. Every hut she passed, the people inside forgot a loved one's name. By midnight, half the village didn't remember why they feared the dark. And then the drums returned. But they were inside everyone's heads, thumping, mocking. D-A-M, 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 D-A-M. It was the wedding march, not for love, but for ritual. They tried to protect Rini with prayer, burned camphor, surrounded her with mirrors and salt, and the last of Munshi's tasbih beads. But when the moon reached its peak, Rini vanished. No footsteps, no scream, just a mirror left behind, showing the inside of a room that didn't exist. A hall lined with chandeliers made of ribcages, where brides danced without feet. And at the head of the room, Munshi, seated on a black stone throne, eyes closed, and weeping. A crown of ash sat on his head. The tasbih around his wrist now pulsed, each bead bearing the name of a child. Bola collapsed at the sight, and from the mirror, a voice echoed into the real world. "You thought it was her wedding, but it was always mine." The village stopped counting days. Time had folded in on itself. The moon no longer rose. It simply hung, a dull, red eye watching from a sky, pulsing like a wound. No one left their homes. There was nowhere to go. Every path out of Gurachari led back in. Boats turned in circles. Forest trails doubled. Even compasses spun aimlessly. And every night, the mirror pulsed. Bola sat in front of it like a mourner before a grave, hoping to catch one glimpse of Rini, one sliver of the old world. But the mirror only showed the throne room, now full of guests. The veiled brides danced endlessly, some with missing limbs, others with eyes in their mouths. Their anklets chimed, but the rhythm was off, half a beat too slow, like time itself struggled to keep pace. Munshi remained seated, still alive, still weeping, but slowly, day by day, his robes darkened, his skin grayed, his eyes turned to mirrors themselves. He was becoming the groom of the forgotten. The villagers begged the tree, the river, the sky, any force that would listen. But silence was their only answer, until the night the banyan tree caught fire on its own. No spark, no storm, just pure, silent flame. From the center of the fire, the bride screamed, not in pain, but in rage. The wedding was complete. All the guests had arrived, except one, the child who escaped her, Pulu. He returned that night, not walking, crawling, backwards, eyes open, mouth sewn shut, but he held something in his tiny hands. Munshi's tasbih, untangled, unburned, and when Bola took it in shaking hands, the flame stopped. The mirror shattered from the inside. The river roared, and the earth split open one final time beneath the mosque. From that pit rose not smoke, but light, blinding, white, ancient. Munshi stepped out, no longer broken, no longer crying, but whole. His voice echoed, "The wedding is over. The debt is paid. Let this ground forget its dead." And then, just as suddenly as he returned, he turned to ash in the wind, scattered, gone, forever. Epilogue. Years later, a new generation grew in Gurachari. The mirrors reflected only what they should. No drums were heard. The banyan tree never bled again. But beneath the soil, near the riverbank, something still beats faintly. Dumb, 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 waiting, not for a bride, but for someone to look back into the mirror.